He is the Professor of Accounting and Head of Accounting Department at Monash University, Malaysia. Neil has spent 18 years in Hong Kong where he researched the modernization processes of Chinese firms, examining issues such as performance management, order qualification, and trust. His China 1000 project is the largest ever survey of operational risk issues for foreign buyers and Chinese suppliers. He has published 2 books, the Chinese Case Book on Operational Risk and Management Control of Multinational Enterprises in China. His publications have appeared in several international journals. Everyone, let's welcome Professor Neil. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andre, and thank you, Sunway University, for giving me this platform. I want to reach researchers, teachers, and students in this talk and give you some background, like starting from baby steps, how to start. Many of you have started industry engagement, but I want to cover some basics for some in the audience. Using social media, LinkedIn, media interviews, integrating teaching, research, engaging industry. Probably the number 1, number 2, we spend a little bit more time on, and definitely on 4 and 5. We want to go over questions. We want to give room and time for questions as we go through. So we all understand 2020s, we're locked down with the university. It's going to create many new teaching, research, and industry engagement opportunities. There's not one industry around the world that is asking a question about what is going to be different in post-COVID-19 when we all get vaccinated. There's not one industry not asking that question. And that's something that it's sort of like we're at the starting line now when it comes to industry engagement in some ways. Even for me, I've been doing it for 10 more years, but I'm still at the starting point where you are when it comes to, okay, now I've got to engage industry in a post-COVID-19 world. And so this is where we're all at the start. How many of us as teachers, researchers, or thought leaders have put together a list of talking points, like a top 10 list? Like, what is your area? Your area is management accounting. What are the top 5 issues of management accounting post-COVID-19? Your area is supply chain. What is the top 5 areas in supply chain post-COVID-19? Like, why are we waiting for McKinsey, BCG, Accenture, the big 4 to come up with talking points to lead our thinking? We should be leading our own thinking by engaging directly with industry. We are just as capable. These top consulting firms, they are filled with humans just like us. So it's our minds that we need to focus our time and reprioritize and get industry engaged so we actually become the thought leaders and not rely on these consulting firms. Are you ready with talking points when the media knocks on your door? And that's, these are some of the things I want you to think about. Now, I want to give you a perspective. Let's go back 15 years and have a look at me in the classroom. That we'd like to add value to you in the program is that we try to bring visiting professors into the program, and you can discuss with the year 1 and year 2 students later that they have had the opportunity to meet. Not very invigorating, is it? And like, if you're in that class, you'd go to sleep. I would go to sleep listening to this person here. This is me 15 years ago. Now, let's fast forward 15 years. Several that we'd like to add value to you to go through. April, this wasn't there, but this is why I'm interested. I just want to show you, what do? I go into factories and I want to find out, how are these making bucket loads of money? This is a car audio manufacturer. I cannot believe they have over 10,000 units of inventory in the halls. You'll see it as the video goes through, how much it's costing the supplier. Suppliers don't understand the cost of holding inventory. You'll see that in a minute. The one over here, this is a USB factory. How is that making money? It's getting the lowest quality chips available. And quality, no, there's no quality inspection. It doesn't matter because they sell to corporates and associations. Okay, so, and then April, this wasn't there. Let's bring that to the classroom. And this was end of 2019. Watch my hammer. What is this?
All right, so, remember, you know about this, right? You're right, all right, don't worry about that, okay, all right? Remember? All right, it's one of those. Okay, so what is this? All right, it's a cover for a hard disk drive.
Okay, so that's what we're talking about. That's my own personal transformation over 15 years when I got involved in industry engagement. But I just want to show you that who benefits from me looking at myself and glorifying myself? Who benefits? The students benefit. Which class would you want to be in? Do you want to be in that class that I showed you 15 years ago, or do you want to be in the class I just showed you then? As a student, it's a no-brainer. You want to be in this later class. That's what industry engagement can do. It just doesn't transform your research. It can transform your teaching. And that's what we've got here on this slide here, that often in the classroom, we are afraid to be on the knife edge. We are afraid to make a commitment to challenge students. We are afraid to actually get away from the textbook and to talk about things that have happened today where we can invigorate students to get ready, to be job ready. The problem is, or the big missing point, is that the outer game, your promise to others, is missing. Our thought leadership is missing because we are not spending time with industry. And what I want to talk about today is ways how you can get started, like in which area you'd like to start, then how to become a thought leader, and then taking massive action, commanding authority. Like, these are all steps that you can go through. And today I'm going to give you different ideas in these areas in this talk. So ultimately, it's your brand. It's your brand that you are working on, your promise to students. If you get involved with industry engagement, it's your brand with your research and your job prospects. Universities want industry engaged academics in the future. KPIs, yes, universities increasingly are setting KPIs for industry engagement. That's the same case all throughout Asia, not just in Malaysia or Bandar Sunway. All right, your teaching at the end, as I said, you come across with authority, a role model, expert, respect. Students need more role models, more than ever in these times. Remember, if you're in the medical profession, without patients, there's no doctor. Without students, there's no teacher. In some ways, engaging industry is about engaging the future prospects for the students you are teaching. Now, this is my motivational part of the talk now, because I need to shock people into thinking that we don't have a choice going forward. Increasingly, students need to be job ready. We need to be preparing them. I was talking to the director of KPMG in Hong Kong. We had a coffee together 3 days ago, and he was telling me the graduates say hi. Yes, they know the accounting. Yes, they can do some data analytics in terms of putting reports together, but they don't know how to communicate the report. They don't know how to dumb it down and bring out the essence to speak to clients. What does this report mean for decisions clients have to make? Okay, so, increasingly, Big Four are crying out for graduates who can actually go even further than just basic having accounting knowledge, having knowledge of statistics. They need to be able to communicate. And so by us getting out there in industry engagement, we understand what the industry needs are, but also we totally understand what the industry stories are that enable students in the classroom to put actual case studies into action. Therefore, students become more job ready in the future. McKinsey's coming out with, this is the new reality, digital speed, ready to reinvent, customer followers, all in data-driven decisions. I'm still on my motivational bent here, by the way, so just bear with me. Like, why should McKinsey be out there saying this when we could be saying this too? McKinsey is no different from you and me. Why do we see that? Because they've been doing this for years. They've been doing this for decades, and it's their brand, it's their promise that they are a thought leader. We can do the same. So Who are you? Where do we start? What are you curious about? What is your favorite topic? If you had to watch a 30-minute how-to video, what would that video be? All right, I want you to think. I'm going to test you here in this first area. Like, choose your niche. Like in 2004, that first video you saw, that's when I first started outreach to the profession, running workshops for a profession. And I was doing that for 6 years before I started getting involved in industry. And then that more recent video, speaking to global sources, I started doing that in 2014, 10 years later. All right, these things take time. Yes, you can speed it up, and I'll give you some ideas for how you can speed that up today. Okay, number 2, your LinkedIn social media. It starts there because this is where you're advertising your brand. Look at when someone comes to your profile, who are you? Who are you in terms of how you can help others? Who are the influencers in your area? Then you follow them. Look at me. I've got Dr. Neil O'Connor, professor, advisor to China and IoT supply chains, global supply chain trainer, editor. All right. So I've got a lot of verbs here. This is what I do. I don't want to spend that space at the top saying professor, head of department of accounting, Monash University. That's or in the about section. But my byline should be how I can immediately help you when you visit my page. I shouldn't even put professor there. All right. I think it's an overused term we give, a title we give to people. All right. When you go to LinkedIn, you want to see how can that person help you? So start to think about, if I were to go to your page, what words would you write next to your name to tell me immediately how you can help me? Are you expert in the plastics industry, the palm oil industry, in the accounting, in auditing, in management accounting, regulatory compliance? Be very, very, very specific. Start there with your LinkedIn. Now, have you anyone heard of Gary Vaynerchuk? You get jab, 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 and then right hook. What does that mean? Well, in the social media and in the marketing area, jab, jab, jab is about give, 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 and then you go in for the ask. Can you help me? How have I used that in the past? Well, jab, 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 I've been giving. So I will make comments like to Paul I'm following, and then always wonderful to hear of a PhD student getting across the line. Yeah, little comments like that. This is important in LinkedIn, that you make comments, don't just like things. And then I make a post, top 10 trends in the post-COVID-19 global supply chain management world. And then I list out those 10, and then suddenly someone says, well, there's something else you should add in here. Well, then I update my top 10. Just because you're posting something doesn't mean you know everything, but you put something out there, and then let the crowd help you build out that knowledge, but at least make a start. By you making a start with 80% of that knowledge, then you are demonstrating yourself, your brand, as a thought leader. And that's what this is about. And that's how you can use LinkedIn. There's a few other issues there. You can post a reference on someone, write short articles, post a summary of a lecture you gave this week with a photo of the PowerPoint slide of the key ideas, and say, oh, really happy to give a lecture on this. This is why it matters to this industry in Malaysia, in Asia, in this world. All right. Just you say 1 or 2 sentences with a PowerPoint slide, bang, you just put it up on LinkedIn. You are starting to become a thought leader by doing that. Wow. What else can you do? Well, I was asked to give a interview in the media, and I thought, oh, what am I going to talk about? What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? I'm a big picture person. So I immediately got out my notepad like this, my notepad, and started writing down, okay, what is the big picture I want to talk about? And so I wrote this diagram. Then suddenly, I gave the interview and everything like that. And this helped me get through the interview fine. But immediately on LinkedIn, I wrote the following: I'm trying to consolidate all my reading and experience on the effects of the trade war, Corona-19 events on global supply chain management into one page. Now notice what I wrote. I said, I did not say I know everything about the effects of the trade war and Corona-19, COVID-19. I said, I'm trying to consolidate. So it's okay to say you're trying to do something. And I put it immediately on LinkedIn. The next week, I do the following. I now digitize it and then put it into the first one. So on the left-hand side, now I've got that picture and I've made a diagram. And I'm saying, I try to take the massive information and factors that impact business and supply chains and boil them down into visual displays like this. Here is a summary of blah, 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 blah. So look at what I'm telling the audience what I'm doing. I take the massive information that impact business and boil them down to visual displays like this. Then a few months later, I make it even better. Here's my updated diagram of the effects of trade war and Corona. All right. So I've given another update and you can see. So once you post in there, notice 1, 2, 3, the diagram is getting better each time. So you don't have to start with perfection. Thought leadership is not about, oh, I need to know everything before I say something. All right. And so, and then, you know, on the fintech side, continuing our analysis, top 10 fintech startups in this region, blah, 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 blah. You see, you get what my point here. And so here's my top 10. And notice someone from the other side of the world, a retired general manager sourcing at Specialty Fashion Group, said, oh, I believe that restoration is possible with supplier confidence and buyers, blah, blah, blah. Then I say, thank you. I can sense my knowledge is limited. I appreciate it. Help me understand more. And so now I've added that into my top 10. You see, this is how you get this conversation. And I'm actually conversing not with other academics, but directly with industry. In some ways, indirectly, what you see on this page is industry engagement. It's not going and visiting a factory all the time. LinkedIn is already there, ready for you to engage industry. What else could you do? Well, right hook. Remember, jab, jab, jab. That's what I was doing with the top 10, with the visualizations. But now it's the right hook. It's my left hand, but it's on your right side when you see my video. Okay. So the right hook, go for the ask. All right. So top right, you'd see the managing director of KPMG. I was speaking to him 3 days ago. And can I discuss, pick your brains over coffee? All right. So I'm asking for his time and then we have coffee. Number 2, can I interview you for our fintech unit? And guess what? We get Douglas to visit Monash University and give a presentation to our staff 1 year later. Number 3, can you present at our retreat? We have Paul Schultz come and present to our staff retreat on the latest goings on in fintech. See, that's what we mean by a right hook. But before that, you have to establish, you have jab, jab, jab by giving. All right. Now, going on to media interviews here. I'm going to leave time for questions later on, but leave media interviews. As I said, get talking points from the media. What are the questions you're going to ask? And then make talking points yourself, like that diagram I do. Develop responses and issues associated. Make a slide for each point. And that's what I've done in media interviews in the past 12 months. Wow. And now moving on to teaching, integrating teaching and research. Bring in guest speakers, but more importantly, and what we were doing at Monash more recently is we wanted to change the role of the teacher to a person of authority in the minds of the students. How do you do that? Well, instead of getting guests directly into the class and then the students talking directly with the guests, you get the teacher to interview the guests, and we put it on the YouTube like we've done here in Leaders in Accounting and Finance. And so we have various staff in our department interviewing alumni in BDO, PwC, KPMG that have been out 3, 4, 5 years, and now we get the students to watch those videos. What are the students seeing differently? Number one, they are seeing this alumni and maybe a role model what they could be in 3, 4, 5 years time. Number two, they are seeing the teaching staff as an authority next to the alumni. Why? Because the teaching staff is asking the questions, because the teaching staff are in the video. See, that raises your profile as an industry engaged person, because in every one of these videos, there is video, documentary evidence, proof that you as a teacher are engaging industry. This is not going to the factory and visiting the factory. Here is industry engagement doing an interview in this way. Wow. All right. Now let's move forward to, universities now. Excuse me for a moment. Thank you. In the universities now, more than ever, and I know a lot of my friends in Hong Kong, where I am right now, Malaysia, Australian government putting pressure on now that we want more impactful research. Now, what does impactful research mean? It means that there's some documentary evidence that industry is impressed or incorporating some of your research. Now, that documentary evidence, and I talked to some leaders in the universities in Hong Kong here, all they need at the moment is, say, an email from industry saying that your research has impressed upon us about integrating some kind of process or some sort of training or some kind of something else, some email evidence, some documentary evidence. That in some ways, that's what they define as being impactful. But in some ways, for me, that's kind of like second base. Like all the universities now are saying, I want impactful research. You've got to be industry engaged. But they're not telling you, how do you get to first base? And some of what I'm talking about today is about how do we get to first base? All right. Universities keep talking about second base. What's second base? You need to have impact. Your research needs to have impact with industry. How do you get to first base? Well, getting to first base is maybe more of a knowledge transfer idea rather than an industry impact idea. Okay, knowledge transfer. That's what we do with research generally. Okay, what are our choices? We can work with public data. We can work with private data. Which is easy? Public data. It's already available. Okay, what's the challenge? There are tens of thousands of other researchers around this globe using the same data. What does that mean? You have to go fast. You have to go fast on the computer. Do your analysis 24/7. Why? Because there are Chinese, there are Russian, there are other students in developing countries that are working 24/7 on public data. You do not stand a chance to compete with them. So what do you do? If you're still going to work with public data, you need to expand your research base or the collaborators you work with. If you're working with 3 collaborators with your school or 2 collaborators, go and find a 3rd or 4th collaborator from a top US university that can actually jumpstart, move forward, push forward even faster your publication. You've got to find the edge, unless the only other way is you need to work 24/7 on this public data as well. Okay. So you can get around that challenge, that competitive challenge, by partnering. If there's already 3 people on your paper, go and reach out and get a 4th key person on that paper. That's my big message. If you want to stay with public data, no problem with that. Private data. That is very, very, very difficult as well, okay? With private data, you don't have competition. Why? You can take your time. It takes time to develop. Look at my experience in 2002. I'm working with Johnny Deng, CFO of a company in Wuhan. He's now an academic professor in US. And we got data from their company in 2002. We ended up publishing it 13 years later, okay? 2009, Annie Wu, a student, is CFO of HTC. We got data from HTC and we are still in the throes of publishing that. And we're looking to submit that to the accounting review later this year. That's more than 10 years later. 2013, working with Mike Bellamy, a passage maker, and we got supplier blacklist paper that I talked about in our presentation last week, and still working on it, and just submitted that to accounting review. 2015, now we're negotiating access to data with a third-party audit services firm, but that's 5 years later after we've developed the relationship. So private data takes time. So you engage industry. Your first and foremost motivation for engaging industry is not necessarily to get data, because that's a long road. That is a 5-year, 10-year road to success. In the immediate term, you're going to get immediate returns more in developing your brand and actually supercharging your teaching. And so that's going to come very, very quickly once you start engaging industry. All right. So what does it mean by engaging industry? What can you do in the meantime if it takes 5-10 years to publish something? Well, you begin with an exploratory approach. And I'm just going to give you some ideas of that, how you can be more exploratory and use that to develop your brand, but also enhance your teaching. And at the same time, you can guide students to actually do research in this way. And I would impress upon a lot of PhD students to start with this approach, rather than moving with a theory testing type research, which does take much longer. So let's just have a look at those two parts. I'll give you some examples and then we'll take some questions. All right, so an exploratory approach, interviews for a report, interviews for infographics, or library research for infographics. So my China Supply 1000 that Andre already talked about, 30 trade expos, 1,075 interviews over 2 and a bit years. You've got to love to do something like that, to go out and do that. You cannot go and do this just to meet a KPI. So let's be very, very clear. You need to choose your niche. If you love plastics, join the Industry Plastics Association. You love palm oil, do that. Finance, and get involved with that. Be very clear of what interests you, okay? Not everyone is interested in electronics like myself. And here's the challenges of over 1,000 electronic component suppliers. What is your number one challenge? How are you responding to that challenge? 2 questions: cost control, competition, sales growth. All right. So then what can we do with that? Then we can look at responses to cost control. Management, relationships, scale economies. Responses to competition, less than half are managing that response, okay? Response to sales growth. You can see we can start to break it down and speak in terms of graphics. Remember what the director of KPMG told me 3 days ago, all right? Students that they employ, graduates they employ, have trouble in explaining or storytelling graphics. They're very good at analyzing, but then what do these graphs mean? What did we do here with this exploratory approach? Well, we looked at number one challenge. We looked at their response. Remember, 2 questions. And we ended up publishing that in a top journal, Industrial Marketing Management, in 2018. Remember, 2 questions. What is your number one challenge? How are you responding to that challenge? If a PhD student come to me today and said, oh, I want to go and interview a particular industry, what questions should I ask? Oh, that's simple. What is your number one challenge and how are you responding to that challenge? That's all. That's all. And we got this publication with that. Of course, there's other questions you ask about how large are you, competition, different things like that. But they are the two big questions that we're asking. So when you are exploring, you explore with open-ended questions, not with 10 pages of survey like I did in the China Supplier 1000. And then you can make an infographic, you know, here are the top challenges, the top circle, then the response to competition, response to cost control, response to technology innovation. And notice when I'm explaining this to industry, and this is a PowerPoint slide that I would not use in an academic presentation, but I would use in an industry presentation. And so I could say here that, industry, notice that less than 50% of the time, suppliers are responding to these challenges directly in the way they manage the company. The response to competition, less than 50% are managing their response. Less than 50% are responding to cost control in a management way. That's a big takeaway, because if 50% are only managing, 50% are really not totally controlling their response. Industry, you need to take control of the response to your challenges. That's the message to industry. Now I'm communicating to industry. Notice that, you see? So this is some examples of how you can start with 2 questions. You create an infographic, you can speak to industry, you can speak to an industry association, and there's some more graphics there. KPMG, I was working with them on a report on the future of manufacturing sourcing in China. And so I interview all of these people, and then we create a diagram, and it looks like a theoretical academic diagram. And then I would talk to industry and take them through that diagram. So you need to practice how to dumb things down, or not make things simplify, how to simplify data so you can better communicate to the world. That is exactly what Big Four are wanting from the graduates with accounting major. Okay, so there's more interviews. We're talking about innovation and change management, and then I make a diagram to help explain, simplify what industry needs to know. Here's another example in terms of hardware startups. So notice, bang, 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 bang. At the exploratory stage, I've just shown you how you can put data into infographics that enables you to tell a story when you are speaking to industry. Like industry engagement, as I said earlier, we can start with LinkedIn. We can start with making videos, but then we go further when we go to speak to the Plastics Association, when we go to speak to the Palm Oil Association, the Electronics Association, the Finance Association. Now we've got to think about how do we put the data into simple diagrams and then help explain our story. And so here's another way of looking at the challenges for IoT startups. Notice that this was a simple model that I started with, but now I make it even better, and I showed this last week. But this is a stage where, yeah, I could put this in front of industry, but I want to go one step further and make this simple by, I would put different circles around different areas of the patterns to explain a story, the story of crowd-funded startups, and what it means for how crowd-funded startups could do better in best practice going forward. Now I'm speaking the language of industry. If I was speaking to academics, I would not even talk about that. I would be talking about, interesting, this bunch of startups over on the right-hand side here, they're the large ones. Notice that they had more challenges with manufacturing, but less with IP protection. And that's why, because the transaction costs of having all the procedures in place to protect their IP, the legal and everything like that, is made available because of size. And you're speaking theory now, right? You're not speaking in terms of the language that industry want to know. And being industry engaged is about knowing how you can change your story, your language, when you move from industry to academic, back to industry, back to academic. That takes practice. And the big message I want to give today, like I said earlier, do not wait until you have perfection to start. Get your stuff out there. Here is my top 5 trends. Here's my top 8 trends. 80% confidence on this. Just say that and then ask for help. Get your stuff out there and get started. All right. And that's what we're doing with the trade war. We're doing the same thing. All right. So I'm going to brush over this, but if we move to theory testing type research, now you're getting into, this is the long road. This is the 5-year, 10-year road where you've got to be in this for the long term, and it's going to take much, much longer. You need to be partnering with the right people so you can speed up the publication process. Again, let me summarize. O'Connor, I can't do what you did. I'm not as crazy as you. Where do I start? All right, let's start with new habits. Social media, it takes time, but make it a habit. Not just to read social media, but to make comments in your particular area. Number 2, media interviews, talking points. Every one of you now, get a piece of paper and you write down 5 top challenges in your domain. What are the 5 top challenges in auditing in Malaysia today? What are the 5 top challenges in finance? What are the 5 top challenges in the plastic supply chain today in Malaysia or in the region or in the world? Whatever your domain is, do you know what the 5 top challenges are? And if not, maybe put that question into an industry group in LinkedIn, and you'll be amazed how much you learn very, very fast. Then you would have started your road to engagement. Choose your industry, reach out, present a workshop. Present. I remember when I went to Singapore, work with NUS in 2012, immediately I contacted Singapore ANCHAM, and they said to me, we don't normally get academics to come and present. I said, please, believe me, trust me, I will present something that will blow your audience out of the water. Here is my PowerPoint slides. I had 47 slides. Luckily, they were nice to me. The guy came back and said to me, Neil, cut that down to 25 and do not speak for more than 17, 18 minutes. I ended up speaking for 35 minutes that day, and they said to me, Neil, you didn't speak for long enough. You were just better than any presenter we've had in our ANCHAM group. All right. What am I saying with this? Every one of you, you need to believe in yourself. You need to believe in yourself that you can be a thought leader, that you have something to add, that you can make a difference. You are not just an academic. And if you want to transition to industry engagement, that comes with a belief and taking bold steps outside of a comfort zone that many of us have not journeyed. New research approaches, gather ground up data, partner with key researchers on secondary data, and access proprietary data. That's like the icing on the cake. But at the end, you're going to be seen by your students as a thought leader. You will be seen as an authority. And most importantly, you're going to be seen as a role model. And in some ways, that's the best legacy that you can leave as an academic. So some of you are probably thinking, I don't have time. Well, yes, you need more time to present at workshops. You need more time to be networking on LinkedIn. You need more time to commit to presenting, yes, but you can take that away from start listening to talks, podcasts in your downtime, when you're doing exercising, when you're doing housework, when you're doing washing. I know you look like a crazy thing walking around the house with headphones on, but I tell you, you've got to think of creative ways to change your time dimension in which we live, and then collaborate with experts. So then you don't have to do all the experting on your project. Let me finish with that, and really appreciate Sunway University for giving this opportunity again, and we'll take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Neil, for sharing your insights and most importantly, your experience on how to engage the industry in your teaching and research. I find it really inspiring that it is not something that you can easily build overnight, but it has taken you over several years to develop it. And today you have actually shown us the how-to steps, even from using social media, such as LinkedIn, and from that, you reach out to so many industry experts. And what's most importantly that we can gain today is that, for us, we can just list out the top 5 challenges in our areas of expertise and show the people that, these are areas that we can, the action steps to be taken and how we can have opportunities to collaborate. And what particularly impresses me about your topic is that it touches on how we can start. First, by looking into our inner game and outer game to be the authority, role model, and also the expert in our area. So now I'd like to open the questions to the floor. You may use the chat function, unmute your mic and ask a question, or you can key in your questions in the chat function and let us know your questions. Prof. Neil, allow me to ask the first question.
Sure.
You have explained to us that the industry engagement is very important for research. Now, for us academics and also researchers alike, and we do have masters and PhD students, how do we talk to the students and also to help them to understand that this engagement can be very necessary for their research?
Well, there's talk like what I just explained now, but most master's programs or PhD student programs do have some coursework. I would increasingly emphasize that the coursework has some element where they have to do a case study with a business. It doesn't matter. Like, we're in a business school, so a case study with any business so they can get to know the business model. They can get to really, I think that's a big challenge with any master's or PhD student, that the answers are not in the textbooks or the literature. The real answers are in the business models that are being sustained and that are being shown to work in the Sunway area, in the KL area, in Klang Valley, in Selangor, in Malaysia. And so get out, go and visit. Everyone's got to go and visit manufacturing, service, even restaurants. Ask 2 questions and then find out from there. You can expand that and make it a bigger assignment where, you've got to go and interview 10 restaurants, and then you rank them on terms of the likelihood of their sustainability, and to explain why do you think some restaurants are going to be more sustainable than others over time, from an accounting angle, from an operations angle, from a marketing angle, and you can take all those different angles, right, depending on the area of interest that the master's or the PhD student has. But I just want to impress on any PhD student in business, please go and have a talk with industry.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you for your explanation, and it is very insightful in this area. And for us, when we have students, at least we know how we can get the students to also link up with the industry in this way. Are there any more questions from the floor?
There's a question I read here. I thought that industry engagement means I have to take leave from academic life, start working in industry, then go back to academia, writing research papers regarding my experiences in the industry. From my explanation, industry engagement works simultaneously with teaching and research. Yet increasingly, like we have this dream that, right, PhD, we get assistant professorship, we get tenure, and then every third year we get sabbatical. And that sabbatical we can go backwards and forwards in industry. I don't think the brain works like that, because what you're actually telling the physical body to do is, for these 2.5 years, you need to be separated from industry. Don't get up to date, just focus on the research. Suddenly in this third year, now you've got to go into industry and spend 6 months there and change channel immediately. The biggest challenge for a lot of academics is actually switching that channel. And a lot of academics that I know that take sabbatical, even if they go to industry, they're spending half that sabbatical working on their research anyway, catching up because they don't have to do admin, they don't have to do teaching, so they're catching up on papers that are in the review process. They're not really engaging industry anyway. So that's a dream that I really don't think works. I think what does work is getting back to basics. What business are we in? We're in the business of being a role model for students that, this professor, if I follow everything I learned from this professor, that will make me even more aligned with what employers want from me when I apply for a job. So, if you think more like that and you put the students first, this changing channel, 2.5 years academia, 1 year industry, I don't think it works. I don't think it works mentally. Like, I cannot switch off from one to the other. I'm kind of, one day I'm spent on research, next day I'm work on industry, but I don't think I can do that for 2.5 years and suddenly switch off and then 6 months industry. Yeah. If you're built that way and it works for you, then by all means do that. I'm not a vice chancellor and changing the rules on that. But I think the reality for most of us, and I've seen that all the universities in Hong Kong, a lot of years in Malaysia, many of us do not have the luxury of taking a sabbatical at the end of 3 years to work in industry. If we do take sabbatical, it's really to play catch up on the research and get publications. So it's a poor excuse to say that, I'm going to wait for sabbatical to engage with industry. Jasper will ask one. If working with industry, will this be working with primary data? Question, thanks. Okay, when I say working with industry, I'm saying getting to know key players in that industry. So with me, I started with the electronics industry by going and interviewing suppliers. Did 1,000 interviews. I had 65 interviewers, but I actually supervised all of the interviews. I went to all the trade shows that we did interviews at. I wouldn't think in terms of, okay, getting data first as being your priority. I think your priority is becoming a thought leader or developing your brand as someone to go to in that industry, as someone that knows answers to industry problems. The data will come in time, but if you're only looking for data, you're going to be very, very disappointed because it's not going to happen every time. I remember I was spending a lot of time with AsiaInspection.com, a third-party auditor, over 2015, 16, 17. I was getting to know the global manager, the regional manager, and then suddenly he just left. He just left in 2018. Well, and he said, "Oh, I can introduce you to my replacement," but it's not the same. You know what I mean? So you've got to be careful. There are risks involved if you're just doing that for the data. And it just so happened that, you know, I've got another third-party auditor, a really good friend. He's a founder, so he cannot leave. And then I've convinced him to give me data, you know, 12,500 audits. But, you know, we've gotten to know each other over 5 years. Data takes a long time, but what happens in the immediate term is you can work on your thought leadership. And what I did in the electronics industry, you know, up in 2012, collected the data, then that gave me the foot into the global sources platform, where every April and every October in Hong Kong, I became one of their platform speakers. And then I did that in 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17. And then people start to get to know you when you're on that platform. I mean, industry people start to get to know you on that platform. Then they contact you. Can you help me with this audit? And I said, sure. Then I go across the border and do 2 factory audits for a client. I've never done a factory audit before, right? So I've worked on serendipity. I didn't say, I cannot do that factory audit. I have to wait until a year after next until I get sabbatical, then I can do the factory audit for you. You know what I mean? So some ways you've got to work with the cycles and the opportunities that industry presents you rather than the time that the university gives you. Sorry for the long answer to the very good question. Sorry.
I think we are coming to the end of the session. It's 3 more minutes to go. Is there a last question? If not, perhaps we can all take a group photo together on Zoom. If you'd like to turn on your mic, please feel free to do so.
Dr. Andre, there is a question from Dr. Jaspal.
Dr. Jaspal, yes, I think we have answered his question.
Dr. Jaspal, you did ask interview focus group discussions questionnaire. I would start with interviews with key people in the industry. So I talked to my PhD student doing big data analytics in the banking industry. Please go to 3 or 4 banks and actually have an open question interview to find out what are their challenges in working with big data. Just open-ended, all right? First of all, just to find out what is that landscape, because literature often is 5, 6, 7, 8 years behind. And you just want to know, where are they up to? Where is industry up to? You're only going to get that by a direct interview or having a coffee, or you reach out to a leader of the banking association and you ask, oh, can I meet you in Sunway? Can I meet you in KL? Can we have a coffee? And then just do that. Start with that. The next stage will be focus group discussions or questionnaire. But the last thing I want to do is have a questionnaire that's sent out anonymously. You really want to do interview or focus group discussions. I hope that helps answer the question. Andre?
Thank you. I think we have come to the end of the session, and I don't see any more questions from the floor. Thank you very much, Professor Neil, for sharing with us a very good insight, and also from your personal experience. It's very inspiring for us to how to go about to engage the industry. So shall we take a group photo before we end the session?
Sure.
Okay, let me put in the gallery mode and everyone the face. Okay, I've taken the photo. Thank you everyone for attending today's sessions. And if you would like further questions, please feel free to contact Professor O'Neill or even Sunway University after this session. Thank you very much.
I'm happy to receive emails or questions from anyone. Very happy to reach out.
Dr. Andre, sorry to interfere. There is a feedback form posted to everyone. Could you please ask the participants to fill it in?
Yes. The feedback form is in the chat function. By all means, can you please fill in the feedback so that we can understand your comments for this session. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to end the session. Thank you again. Goodbye, everyone.